Hello everyone, this is Ryoko368, and welcome to the FanFic Critic vlog. Apparently, all I had to do was verify my YouTube account, and now I can do videos that are more than 15 minutes, which will make doing this a little bit easier now that I don't have to worry about pausing as much. So I figured I'd upload one more video for the day before I call it quits. So, we're going to be taking a look at a Binding of Isaac fanfic called Do I Really Exist? By VanillaFireflies. Okay. Description. As Isaac wanders the basement, he tells the story of how God requested the ultimate sacrifice and if there really was a purpose behind it, and why the heck is every single first letter of every single word capitalized? Whatever, okay. It's rated Fiction T. It's in English. It's Family Hurt Comfort. Has 2,018 words, and it was published May 31st, 2016. And don't worry, all the stories I have listed is complete. Alright, before I even start reading, the entire thing is in bold. Kind of reminds me of that fanfic I had written, Back to the Past. Well, there's a reason why I did that. In that fanfic, the reason why some of the text was in bold was because it was supposed to be, it was from my character's point of view, and it was because it was supposed to be part of the author's note. That's why I kept it bold, but it makes it very hard to read. But I've seen worse things than this, so it's still legible. It's just kind of glaring. So, let's get to work. My mother wasn't always like this. To her, I was the perfect son she could ever hope for. We did everything together. She would take me to church every Sunday, to the park whenever I felt like going. She even took me grocery shopping with her or to her own friend's house for some girl time while I played with their friends for hours on end. However, or wherever she went, I came along for the ride. I guess that was because I'm only 8 years old. She'd do anything to protect me from harm. She didn't even trust babysitters or nannies because not everyone was all that they seemed. Of course, I didn't seem to mind because she was my mother, and I enjoyed every minute of her anyway. She was like a guardian angel to me, and somehow I appreciated that very much. My mother was always a very religious woman with a kind heart. She was just like any other Christian, with the way she prayed twice a day to her God and went to church every Sunday. Every religious holiday that would come every year, she would always be prepared to celebrate it with me because I was just as religious as she was. That's an incomplete sentence. Well, almost. I went about my own ways with my religious views and let her do her own thing with hers. I usually kept to myself. I often stayed in the desolate area I called my room and played with my toys or drew whenever I could. Geez, for an 8-year-old, he's awfully sophisticated talking and whatnot. I always had a dream of becoming a famous artist when I grew up, but I somehow felt like my art just wasn't good enough for the world to see yet. Well, yes, because you're 8. I'm still a very young child, so I obviously didn't have much skill. Like they say, practice makes perfect, right? I'll get there one day, I'm sure of it. My mother and I, we were as happy as could be. I felt like we were still the perfect family even though my father is no longer around anymore. He still drops by to visit me every once in a while, and sometimes takes me on fun trips with him when I were to spend every other weekend with him. Oh, when I were to spend... Okay. Reading it like that, yeah, that makes sense. I do still miss having him around, but at least I still get to see him often. Everything seemed to be going well other than that. That was, until the day he began to speak to her. That was the day I would never forget. I remember sitting in the living room with my mother, remaining on the floor and messing around with my toys while she sat on the couch watching Christian broadcasts on television as usual. Suddenly, a voice came to her. It was the voice of God. It was the voice of God himself, I soon realized. Mary, he called out to my mother, your son has become corrupted by sin. He needs to be saved. I will do my best to save him, my lord. I'm trying to sound like the game's narration, by the way, so if I mess it up, I'm sorry. And for those who aren't familiar with The Binding of Isaac, it's a roguelike game. Just look it up on Google and stuff. It's a pretty popular game. Well, for computer games anyway. It's also on the Xbox One, the PS4, and The Binding of Isaac Rebirth is on the Nintendo DS. Let's continue. Mother quickly replied as she removed all that was evil from my hands. My toys, my crayons and pencils, even my own clothing. She also shaved my entire head. Okay, that makes sense why This is something that they added in for this fanfic, because in the game, Isaac is bald the entire time, so I do like that the author here decided to add in the tidbit that she shaved his head and that's why he was bald, because that's the only explanation. Why else would he be bald? Unless he was actually Lex Luthor, and that's why, well, that wouldn't make any sense unless Lex, I guess Lex could technically be a nickname for Isaac. No, I'm stretching it, never mind, forget I said anything. She also shaved my entire head, ridding it of all the blonde curly locks that stuck to it like glue, but apparently that wasn't enough. The voice of God erupted in my mother's ears once more. You have done as I've asked, but your son's soul is still corrupt. He needs to be cut off from all that is evil and confess his sins. He roared to her. I will follow your instructions, Lord. I have faith in thee. Mother said in a calm tone of voice, smiling brightly. I became confused as she brought me to my room and locked me away for a while. She told me I was to stay in there, locked away from the evil that lurked within the outside world. I was even more confused. What did I do wrong to deserve this? That's when I knew something terrible was about to happen. I watched from the tiny crack in my bedroom door and listened on to their conversation with fear pounding in my little bitty heart. Because I still question your devotion to me. In order to prove your faith, I will ask one more thing of you, he pleaded. Yes, Lord, anything. The yes, Lord, anything should have been in its own separate paragraph, but I digress. Mother used her eager voice, as if impatient. To prove your love and devotion to me, I require a sacrifice. Your son, Isaac, will be that sacrifice. When I heard my name, my heart dropped to my stomach while my figure began to shake violently. However, I still continued to listen. Go into his room and end his life as an offering to me to prove you love me above all else. Mother's eyes widened at this, but she still accepted the request as she crept into the kitchen and grabbed a knife from the holder. I could only tremble with a fear so horrifying I was sure my own heart was going to give out in a few minutes. Mother would never go this far to please her Lord, would she? Well, if you guys are both religious and stuff, wouldn't it be our Lord, not her Lord, unless Isaac's supposed to be worshipping something completely different altogether? And also, by the short narration in the beginning of the game, I wasn't under the impression that Isaac himself was super religious. He just seemed like a normal kid. It was his mother who was obsessed with watching Christian broadcasts. But I'm being a little too nitpicky at this point, so forgive me. I tried my best as I scrambled around my room, desperately looking for a place to hide, but to no avail. I was out of luck, for she had boarded up the windows and removed anything I could cram my tiny self into. When she burst through the door, I was sure my insides burst as well. I panicked. What was I going to do now? That's when I noticed my rug, and the trapdoor that led to the basement hidden beneath. Mother herself never knew about it, but thankfully I did. I felt a bit of hope flowing back into me once I flung the door without hesitation. Just as she came through with a deranged look on her face, even I couldn't stand laying my eyes upon. I smiled smugly at her as I threw myself down into the unknown depths below. Hopefully she would never be able to find me down there. She always hated the basement anyway. As I wandered through the unusually large basement, I felt my eyes begin to well up with tears. It was cold and very smelly down there. Did she ever bother to clean this place up? What basement has puddles of stool and lost coins lying around? Unbelievable. After I got to a room far away from the trapdoor as possible, I sat myself down in this corner and thought for a bit, with the tears still rushing down my pale, big-eyed face. Why would God choose now to tell Mother these strange things? Why was I to be the sacrifice? Sure, I wasn't always a good kid at times, but that was just me. It was just the way I was, I guess. I've done much worse things that went as far as wishing death upon my own sister, I'll just call her Maggie. Maggie. I felt very ashamed of myself after that because I quickly discovered that she passed away with cancer a few months back. You discovered that she passed away with cancer. She's your sister, so I think you would know that she would die from cancer seeing she's your sister. I'm assuming that she's living with you. Unless it's a deal that one parent took one kid and then the other took the other, but you don't really hear of that very often anymore. She was only 5 years old, poor thing. I felt horrible for what I've done because I felt like it was all my fault, even though I loved her dearly and was a very good older brother to her. Well, if you were really that great of an older brother, then why the heck did you wish death upon her? That's not being a good older sibling. It's amazing what jealousy can do to a person. Just look at Cain. He went as far as to commit homicide towards his own brother Abel. All because poor Cain was ridden with jealousy and greed. Judas was a sinner, too. He betrayed God and turned to Satanism instead. Not once has he regretted his choices after that because he seemed quite happy with them. I wasn't surprised because he was the type of person who would do anything bad, even if it weren't to please his new God. Eve was almost the same way as with Cain. Okay, I understand that the story is trying to introduce the other characters of the game in a creative way, but are these supposed to be... how are these people connected to Isaac in a sense? Are they supposed to be his friends? It doesn't really explain that. I digress, so let's continue. The more I thought about these things, the more I began to realize that Mother sent me because I simply didn't exist. I was a sinner, and that was that. Mother would sometimes tell me that I was a sinner and that I should think about my future choices and confess to Him right away in order for myself to be forgiven and for my soul to be pure again. I began to lose faith in everything I once knew because now look where I'm at. Here I am, stuck in a filthy basement full of flies and rotting stool. Perfect. Was I really that bad? Was I not God's perfect child? These things stuck to me like vultures at my back the more I thought about them. After a few days of wandering in the basement, I wondered why my mother hasn't come down to find me, let alone why I couldn't seem to get myself out of there. I should have just broken the windows or something and ran away as far as my legs could carry me. I scoffed. The things people do for their religion. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps trailing behind me. I stopped dead in my tracks, wondering who could possibly be down here with me at this hour. Or maybe it's your mom who's trying to murder you? I was certainly too afraid to turn around, but my brain forced me to spin my body in a quick circle, and immediately my eyes locked with my mother's. What do you know? Darn. Again, I wasn't surprised. I knew this would happen sooner or later, right? As she slowly cornered me, I knew I had no other choice but to stay in my spot because if I tried to run, I would probably die quicker. There was no way out anyway. That trapdoor didn't even have stairs. I could have died as it was falling down what seemed to be a 50-foot drop. No wonder that door remained out of sight. I rolled my eyes at that. Thanks a lot, Rug. I sighed as I let myself accept my fate and let her come at me. She began to talk to him again. I will do as I'm told, my lord. I love you above all else, she cried out as she crept closer to me, closer to her only son named Isaac. Well, why would you have more than one kid named the same name? That would be like instead of, my name is Megan and I have a sister, so, what if they decided to name both of us Megan? That would be so confusing. I gave her a pleading look, a look that nobody could refuse, not even she herself. She ignored this and, of course, refused it. Poof, typical. Okay. My body quickly lost all sense of emotion for a second when God decided to intervene. I didn't notice the shelf above our heads with old items stacked on top of it, and I didn't bother to wonder why it was there in the first place. An old holy Bible threw itself down and knocked Mother out cold. I felt myself erupt with a sudden joy as I realized that it was all just a test to prove her faith towards him. I knew he was watching over me this whole time, and that he has truly forgiven me and my sins after all. After my mother awoke several hours later, she was hysterical. She threw me into her arms and told me that it was okay to commit sin because we just can't help ourselves even when we don't realize we have sinned. We're not always perfect. That's just how God made us, so we can learn from our mistakes and build ourselves stronger as human beings. He loves us all and is glad to call us his children. Or God, in this case, just comes across as a douchebag in this story, but okay, whatever. I was satisfied after I knew everything was okay again. I forgave Mother for what she had tried to do to me because she knew it was all just a test as well, and that she could never put me in harm's way ever again. We resumed our normal daily activities as mother and son, and I was glad to be given back my clothes and crayons so I could continue to reach my goal towards an artist. Unfortunately, though, Isaac was permanently traumatized because of his mother shaving his head. Well, and the other things that happened, too. I highly doubt the kid would be all nice and forgiving after this. I mean, hello. He gets all of his stuff taken away. He gets his clothing taken away. He gets his head shaven. Then he gets locked in his room, and then his mother tries to kill him. It's like, no, that wouldn't be oh, I forgive you. I think he'd be a little messed up for a while after that. Life was simple once more, and we were both happy yet again. I smiled the biggest smile to myself for a while longer after that. I guess I do exist after all. And that's the end of the story. I mean, like layout-wise for the story, and spelling and grammar-wise for the most part, the story was well written. Aside from that, though, I mean, I understand that it's kind of supposed to be like a story version of the opening narration of the game, but, you know, the author adding in their own sappy, happy ending to the game, although the game isn't supposed to have a happy ending. But, you know, the story itself, Isaac came across as too sophisticated. It didn't seem like how I would envision Isaac to be. I mean, you don't ever see his character talk in the game. I mean, there's really no dialogue except for, like, you know, the sound effects from the game and whatnot. I mean, it just seemed like the story was trying, but it just doesn't work. It's not really bad, but it's not exactly good either, and I don't quite understand why they felt the need to have the text be all in bold, and I do not understand why in the description every single first letter of every word is capitalized. It just does not look good. This is something you don't want to do. Aside from that, though, it's not too terrible of a story. I would say I would give it like maybe 6 out of 10 stars as a rating. I mean, it's decent. And it's not too far-fetched from the game. It was just most of the dialogue and Isaac's inner monologue just did not make any sense. But I digress. You know, if you guys want to check it out, links in the description below. Please, 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 please leave the author a review. Even if you don't have a fanfiction.net account, just leave them a review. Even if it's a guest review. Because, you know, fanfic authors need to have their feedback, whether it be good or not. And please be civil when you're leaving feedback. Don't be a troll. Don't be a douche. Well, thank you for watching today's vlog. More will come eventually. Until then, TTFN.